are live.
Good evening, people, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keith Lazar. I'm a SEMBA member, past president, been around for a few decades. How's that sound, beekeeping? Some of my mentors were the Sutherlands and a variety of other people over the years. And now that I've gotten a little bit older, I'm a mentor and I'm behind the scenes and doing things all the time. All right. This evening, I'm going to talk to you quickly, about 10-15 minutes, about 10 different things you might be able to do and be aware of your hives in January. And the first one is check your existing hives. Well, how do I do that? Yeah, it's kind of comfortable right now. There's not much snow on the ground. And you should go out there and look around your hives, check the entrance reducer. If it's in the small position, look and make sure it's not blocked. If it is kind of blocked with dead debris on the bottom, take a coat hanger and bend it at a small angle and pull out any dead bees that might be there blocking the entrance for the existing hive. Please make sure that your hive is blocked from the wind. You can use a variety of items, straw bales, a tarp, something like that to slow down the wind from blowing. Even though the bees have propolized all the gaps between the boxes at this time of the year, hopefully, and it's very sticky or it's very hard, it's like cement glue at this time, air can still get in there occasionally. If you've wrapped your hives, that's a great thing to do. Make sure that they have ventilation available. There's some air can get in and out, a little opening on the porch. Key thing, it gets windy here in Michigan, as we all know that. You should have some type of weight on top of the telescoping cover, a brick, a block, something heavy, keep it open. Also, there's all kinds of neat toys on the market. There's some infrared cameras that are very reasonably priced, and you can purchase those either online or at some of the facilities and attach it to your camera and look, and you'll see a radiant red glow in your hive, and that's a great sign. You may have seen it online advertised or other people on Facebook on the different entities here in Michigan of showing that. They're going, wow, look at my hives. And they've got a whole row of hives all nice red glowing. So at this time of the year, that's a great thing. And hopefully those people will do very well here in the spring. Next thing, number 2. Prepare for midwinter inspection. Now, what does that mean? Well, here in Michigan, usually sometime in February, about the second week of February, don't quote me on time period, but that's usually a good protocol, is we'll have some nice sunny days, temperature will climb above freezing, and it's comfortable. If you go out to your hive, you may see some dead bees about 10-15 feet away from the hive, and they went out and did a cleansing flight, and they kind of didn't make it back because it got too cold and they died. So this may be a good time for you to go in there, just take off the telescope and cover, and if you can, pry open the inner cover. Don't break the boxes apart and do a quick peek. They may be at the top, and if you can see that they might need some food, you might want to take some granulated sugar and spread it on top of the top bars for added food for them. Again, you go back to the bottom and you see a bunch of dead bees in front of your entrance reducer, whether you have it on the large size or the small size. Clean that out. And remember, only open the top, not the frame, not the boxes, because you'll break the propolis seal in there. I have snow around my hive, and on top of it, do I shovel it away? No, snow's a great insulator. The bees are like in an igloo. How the Eskimos survive, they made igloos. How do people survive when they're lost out in the Arctic? They'll make an igloo. So your bees have got a little igloo and they'll stay alive. Let me step back for a minute. I will take questions later on, and on Zoom, we have a chat program. So after I'm done and the next speaker comes on, if you wish, direct your questions to me on chat and I'll answer them, and then we can go on and listen to Mr. Bonniefield speak about his program also. Now we're all done inspecting our bees and they look very positive. What do we do next on these cold winter days? Well, A beekeeper. We all have unused equipment in the house or garage or attic or wherever. Inspect that equipment, see if it needs to be repainted or fixed, whether you need to use some glue, some nails, cut a deep box down to a medium box. A lot of the old timers did that when the boxes started to rot away from lack of inspection. And right now, if you have a garage that's heated, use that, or transfer everything downstairs into your basement and use your basement and inspect your stuff. While you're doing that, number 4, inventory your equipment. See what you have available for next season, the status of it. Be aware that you have it. Again, paint it, keep it up to date, look at the condition of it. Do I need to go out and order more new equipment and get that equipment ordered up and build it? Have it ready to go in the garage or around downstairs in the basement. Next thing is, okay, I've done my inventory. Order my equipment. Presently, if you haven't seen the price of equipment because of sticker shock from the price of wood, wood presently is at its highest economical cost historically. All the brokers that myself and my assistant up in Grayling use are just terrified. I mean, the price has gone outrageous. So what happens? Everybody and their brother has got up increases. Have you gotten some of the catalogs yet? Some of the boxes are running $15 all the way up to $21, $22 for some deeps. That's not select, that's commercial. So don't have sticker shock when you see some of the prices from some of the companies and the big boxes and the local people equipment, because, you know, unfortunately, beekeeping now has become a popular item. A lot of people are doing it because of their home. They have more time and they're enjoying the hobby. When you're ordering your equipment, or if you need equipment, let's say you only have 5 or 10 medium frames available. Well, the easiest thing to do would be order a lot of 100 frames, because then the price is pretty reasonable. And usually they're running about $95 to $1.15 per frame. So $115 for 100 frames. Do I order my foundation at this time of the year, the wax foundation, crimped wire, or just foundation without wire in it? No, wait until the weather warms up. You take the chances of it becoming pieces that you can melt down for candles later on. If it's plasticell and it's wax coated, yeah, go ahead and order it up, get it from the suppliers that you have, and make sure you know how much you need and what color you want. Now, for some reason or another, the basic colors are black, yellow, and then off-white. Okay, black we use so that we can see the cell or the egg in the bottom of the cell after the bees draw it out and lay the egg in there. Now, I hear and I have debates with other beekeepers. Oh, it's got to be yellow. It can't be off-white. Do the bees really care what color the other foundation is besides drawing it out and filling it with brood or filling it with honey or bee bread? No, they don't care. So it's user preference. Some people like the different colors. Some people got to have that color. And historically, green is for the larger drone foundation to help in mite control. So that's the way the industry is, and that's how they have things presently. Number 6. Well, our weather has been kind of nice, and so take the time to assemble and paint your equipment. You've got a garage or you've got a basement and you can go downstairs and assemble the equipment. You've got it stored, and basically you have that equipment ready. So in the spring, when there's a good honey flow going on, you're not running around going, oh my goodness gracious, what do I do now? I don't have any equipment ready to go. You do this ahead of time now here in the slow time of the year, and you have time to do it, build it, paint it. If you don't put your wax foundation in yet, because that may become fragile, and if you have to move it, If you have a plasticell foundation, put that in. It's not going to hurt anything. But I would wait until the last minute to install regular wax into your frames. And that way you don't have crumbled pieces together. Well, you've got that done. And you still have time on your hand. Start looking for bees, okay? Whether you're going to buy a 2-pound, a 3-pound package, or you're going to buy a nuke. Many places are advertising already. Some of the prices are outrageous. You can shop around online or by word of mouth and call and leave messages for different suppliers throughout the state. I've noticed a couple suppliers out of Wisconsin coming here to Michigan late April with bees and a variety of things. So I'm going, why are people advertising here like on Craigslist or Facebook or a variety of other things? So they have a market and they're going to have drop-off points in Ann Arbor and I think somewhere on the west side of the state. More power to them, but you look at a 3-pound package and it's 160 something. So it's a little pricey and you're paying for it in the end. A lot of the suppliers in the area have their prices ranging from 118 at one of the lowest up to 155, 160. So depends on what you wish, where you want to get it from, the delivery dates. And remember, delivery dates are tentative upon weather conditions and how that processor or that merchant gets that product up here. So don't always count that date on your calendar. Be aware that it could vary because of weather conditions from the supplier or acts of nature from God. When you're also purchasing a nuke from somebody, a good rule of thumb is ask them several things. Frame, 5-frame, or 6-frame nuke? What's included? Do I have to return any of the packaging to you or swap it out? So maybe one price includes everything. You take it and you get a free box. You can use it as a swarm trap later on in the season. Handle it. What type of queen is given to that nuke system, whether it's laying or it's just been introduced? And a lot of people think, oh, I can get a nuke back in March or April sometime that's Michigan stock. Well, I'm kind of leery about that. Maybe some of the brood's Michigan stock, but I know darn well that queen's not here from Michigan because our queen breeders in Southeast Michigan start production here about that time, and it takes a couple of weeks for the queens to come out and get fertilized, and then they're available by the supplier. So be leery of that. Buyer beware. Also, frame size, whether it's a deep nuke or a medium nuke. A lot of suppliers are running all deep nukes. There are a few people out there that have mediums. I know a lot of people have medium boxes that they use, but it's okay to run a deep nuke box or a deep brood box for your system. And that way you can have those frames in there. And if you have extra frames, you can swap them out. And also, again, you can use those frames for your the nuke box that you received, and then use it as a swarm trap later on in the season. Biggest thing is ask them what's included in that nuke, what you get, and what they expect back. Most of them nowadays don't want to deal with receiving other products unless they're brand spanking new and not used. So the reason being is because of different diseases in the area. Just like the major producers, you get that plastic container back nowadays, and you pay for it, but they don't want anything back like used to happen. Probably historically since bees were being sent up. You had to return that cage. Well, now they found out that just transfers disease from one part of the country to the other part of the country. And the producers don't want those boxes or cages back. They're yours. They're great for show and tell if you do any programs in the schools or to the general public. You have that. Sometimes they're grungy. Kind of clean them up and sanitize them in a quick bleach or weak bleach solution and have that, or give it away or recycle those. They're recyclable, just throw them in your recycle bin at whatever city you're at and off you go. What else can you do? Well, you can attend other meetings like this, attend programs. Since we're all doing viral or virtual programs, virtual programs, programs like this exist. You can go to the MBA site and even our site and look and see that we're sponsoring things monthly. Other programs have got programs, other groups have programs growing also similar to this. So SEMBA's not having a program this year, as we all know, because of the situation. I believe the next or the most earliest person-to-person program may be Honey Festival, the first Saturday in August. So depends upon what our governor decides to do and whatever she instills and how everything else evolves on this new year that we have. So there's so many variables that are unknown. We just have to play it by ear. You don't know, you might want to look at the NBA site, the SEMBA site, Kalamazoo site, and the other sites that are available in the area. So be aware of that, attend them, learn information. Remember, you ask 10 beekeepers a question, you get 11 answers. So take it with thought and, decide to use whatever you wish. You hear a good idea, you might want to try that for a season. Talk to the local beekeepers in your area. How many times you go out driving and you see some hives sitting at somebody's home? I'm sure if you stop in and say, hey, hi, I'm a local beekeeper. I live a couple miles away from you. How are things going? What are you doing? What type of bees are you running? What luck have you had? Any problems that you're aware of? Are there any other beekeepers in the area? And you go on there. Now, this happens, believe it or not. Hives made it through the winter, okay? They do make it, believe it or not. What do you do next, okay? I've had several people over the years that are new beekeepers, only 1 year, and they come up when I talk to them and I say, hey, did your bees make it? Yeah, they made it. What did you do to improve that for next year? I don't know. Well, what I tell them is recall what you did the previous year, remember what you did, how you did things, and try to follow the same suit and do your inspections and do your medications and follow that suit. Most of the people that I speak with that do the medications, and not just 1 or 2 times, like 3, 4 times, beginning of the season, mid-season a couple times, and specifically at the end of the season, have great results. And those are some of the things that I'm finding out or we're finding out that help us out in the hive. So those bees made it through the wintertime. What's going to happen to them? I'm just going to, oh, that's cool. Well, those bees are going to go gangbusters. Okay, if you don't give them enough room and give them space, they're going to swarm on you. And then you're going to go, oh, what do I do now? Well, you can make splits. By that time, maybe some local queens will be available, but the big producers have queens available. Now's the time you kind of roll the dice. Well, do I get a couple queens now, pay for them, and then pick them up in April or May, and then look at my hives and make a split? Or do I do a walkaway split? Pull a brood frame out, look at it, make sure the queen's not on there, and put it into a nuke box, whether it's medium or deep, and hopefully they'll understand that the queen's missing and they'll evolve a new queen. From that, you might be able to sell that nuke to somebody else or develop another hive system for yourself. Kind of reasonable program for you instead of spending the money if you're kind of a frugal beekeeper like several of us are. Right, Rich? Have that equipment ready for making a nuke, and you'll have it available. Now, this is the last thing I have to really say. Last but not least, pray. Hopefully for good weather. We don't get any Arctic weather that comes down here with high winds. Your bees are from great stock, whether they're Michigan mutts, carnies, or whatever you have. Everyone made it, so expect to have ample supplies. The treatment worked. Remember what you did the previous season. Try to follow suit and do the same thing again. And enjoy your bees. That's about all I have at this time. I'll answer the questions on the chat. I see I have several requests already. But if you have questions here during this program, use the chat. I'll answer them. And that's about all I have to say. Mohammed, I'm going to give it back to you for the next person.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. For a lot of new beekeepers, getting them, through the winter is, just the beginning, and then they're puzzled. What do I do next when they're gangbusters? That's the tricky part.
Yes, it is. And they're elated that they made it through the wintertime because they hear so much negativism. And then you have to remind them, hey, you got to do something. Otherwise, they could, swarm on you. And then you're starting back again.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, everybody.
Up next, we have Brad Bonniefield. And he is going to speak to us, or speak to the beginner beekeepers, which we have a giant influx of. I've noticed, because people are falling head over heels in love with bees. So what better way to get them started than with good sound counsel and advice and teaching. So without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mohammed. Tammy is going to talk for a minute about shirts. There's been a lot of questions about shirts. So,
hi, all my beekeeping friends. We have a nice stock of beautiful Semba shirts available for $20 each on the website, $5 shipping. And I believe we still have it set up where if you want to drop by the house and pick it up, you can. There are some pictures on it, but I wanted to do a little personal show and tell just to let everybody know that they're out there. So I guess the light's not so good. We've got a nice Semba logo on the front. It's a little hard to see. And then can you make sure my back is how many has my, and this is a beautiful back. Can you see it?
better.
Excellent. So you can get a really good view of that. Last year's shirt was a brown. We started with a brown shirt, but the idea came up to color our shirts for the year of the bee so we don't forget. We'll hear maybe that along the way, but this year to mark our queens is blue. So we have blue shirts so you can remember what color to mark your queens this year.
That was last year.
Oh, this is like, oh, that's right. So we missed a year. Sorry, this was last year's blue shirt. I forgot. Time has slipped away so much. But they're still very cool shirts. So if you want to go on the website and order a shirt, I would love to ship one to you. So thank you. And here's Brad.
White's the color this year.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Oh, let's see.
Brad, do you still need me to pull up the presentation?
Can someone make me presenter?
Oh, okay, you got it. Never mind, Mohammed.
Okay, no problem. I'll make you co-host. All right, there we go. Did that work? Can you present now? Can you share?
Trying. Hitting the share screen. It's taking a second. Here we go. Okie dokie. Oh, damn. So you want to be a beekeeper. So, I should introduce myself. Bradley Bonniefield, been a beekeeper for about 10 years, getting close to 10 years, probably 9. Win Harless was one of my most famous mentors, but lots of people in Semba have always been very helpful. So what we're going to talk today is just the general topics of being a beekeeper.
Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
So honeybee basics. What is a honeybee? There's lots of different honeybees. Not all of them are, or lots of different bees. Not all of them are honeybees. There's a very limited amount of honeybees, but the honeybee is the one that is used to its fullest extent by man for pollination. And they transform a lot of different things from their pollen and the nectar that they collect to make honey, pollen, propolis, royal jelly, and wax. The obvious three types of honeybees are drones, which are males, the queen, usually only one in a hive, and worker bees, which are all female. And there's a little bit of a presentation seeing the difference between A is a drone, a little bit larger, kind of got a furry butt. Queen has a larger thorax and a large abdomen with larger size ovaries, and then your worker bee. And there's different varieties of honeybees also. Namely, you have your Asian honeybees, you have European honeybees, and African honeybees. Drones aren't always around. Drones do not survive through the winter because they're actually kicked out of the hive. They're distinguished usually by they have a larger body, big eyes, and a more muscular thorax. Drones is a real good way. Drones are a real good way to practice marking queens because they don't have stingers, and they really don't do a lot in the hive other than mate with the queen while they actually do that in flight, and sometimes produce heat if needed. But they do take up a lot of resources. And in the fall, you'll actually see them actually pulling, if there are drone bodies or larvae still in the comb, you may actually see them getting dragged out of the hive and kind of like just tossed out. And they do die after they mate. So instead of having a stinger, they have a, and there's their big eyes. The queen. So only one queen to a hive in 99% of the situations. There are certain situations where you can have hives that you may have multiple queens that are separated, or there even can be, depending on how large of a hive it is, you can have multiple queens. Queens have a smooth stinger. Worker bees have a barbed stinger. The barbed stinger is so that when they sting something, it is embedded into the victim and it pulls out a muscle and part of their intestines, and that muscle injects the venom. But the smooth stinger is meant to kill other queens. So if you have multiple queens hatching out in a hive, they'll actually duke it out. And usually the queen will go around the first one that gets out and kill the other queens that are still in their cells. Generally speaking, most people say queens lay about 1,000 eggs a day, depending on space, but they can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. She controls whether a worker is going to be produced from one of her eggs or a drone. A worker egg is an egg that has been fertilized, and a drone egg is not. And as she's laying that egg, she determines whether or not she's going to fertilize it, which is just amazing in my sense. How she determines whether or not she's going to lay a drone or a worker is the size of the cells. So she uses her mandibles to measure the size of the cell. And if the cell is a larger cell, she will actually lay a drone egg versus a worker egg. Queens are produced from just normal worker eggs. The hive will determine whether or not if there's a queen missing, or if there's a situation where they're going to swarm, or they're going to, they have an old queen that isn't producing well enough. So the difference between, and I'll get a little bit ahead of myself on this point, the difference between a queen and a worker is that they are fed a higher or a richer royal jelly diet with the amount of protein that is in it. Worker bees just get regular royal jelly. Queens get more of it, and it has a higher content of protein. An interesting point to this is that worker bees for your summer bees and winter bees are different depending on the royal jelly also. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Basically, she's fed, she's groomed by all the other workers. If you think that the queen actually runs the hive, not necessarily so. The workers will chase her around. They will control whether she can lay or not. So there's a lot of different things going on, and that's a lot of times determined by the pheromones within the hive. A lot of people will mark their queens. The reason that you would mark a queen is that way, if you have a queen that if the hive swarms, or she's replaced, you will see that the new queen doesn't have a mark on her, and you know that your queen has been replaced. And the colors are green, blue, yellow, white, and red, and they rotate every 5 years. And there's a marked queen. And there are some tools that you can use to help you mark a queen. A lot of the queen rearers will just pick her up and hold her in their fingers and put a little dot on her. And there's actually little like stickers that you can actually get printed with like numbers and things like that on it, that some queen producers actually use also. Worker bees. 97% of the hive is worker bees. They're doing all the work. They live generally 35, 40 days in the summer, depending on lots of different conditions. They can live longer, obviously, but generally speaking, that's a good time frame. They have to live a long time, depending on the climate, to survive through winter. So your winter bees may have to survive all the way from October, maybe even September, all the way up to April and May. Worker bees, start out as a fertilized egg, like you said before, where a drone is an unfertilized egg. The egg is laid by the queen, and it's in an egg shape or form for 3 days. It will then turn into a larvae. At that point, nurse bees will start feeding royal jelly for 3 to 5 days, depending on the situation, depending on the resources that are available. And they will then turn into a full-fledged larvae that is then ready to be capped. The larvae will emit a pheromone that indicates to the other workers that that cell can now be capped. That is also the same process that varroa mites use to identify when to actually get into a cell and coexist with a larvae while it's capped. And after the worker bee will emerge around 21 days, depending on climate again. Supposedly in Georgia with the warmer climate and things like that, they may emerge in 19 days, and a queen that emerges in 16 days may emerge in 15. So what are the duties of a worker bee? Well, there's lots of different duties. They can overlap depending on what is needed within the hive. So bees actually are very cleanly. They'll, if it doesn't belong in the hive, they will take it out. So if there's dead bees in the hive, if there's other insects that happen to get into a hive and are killed, they'll pull them right out and fly away with them. And they don't just drop them off the doorstep. They actually kind of fly them away from the hive. If you have like a sheet of newspaper in there to separate two different hives that you're trying to combine, they'll chew up that newspaper and they'll fly that out as soon as they can. Of course, a queen always has attendants. They feed the queen. They groom the queen. That's why you will normally see a queen if you buy a queen, you will have attendants with her because their duty is to actually feed the queen. And so if you ever buy a queen and she doesn't have attendants with her in her queen package, that's a warning sign that you might not want to use that queen producer anymore. They pack pollen. So the bees that come in where they have their pollen in their sacs on their legs, they'll take that off of the bees and they will put it into honeycomb to be used as bee bread. Obviously, there's a lot of fanning going on during the hotter days in the summer. You will see your bees actually bearding on the outside of your hives at times when it's very hot to help cool down the hive. They seal the honey, obviously, once it gets down to 18% moisture content. Honeycomb building is a very important duty, and that's something that you really need to take into consideration if you're expanding your hives. It's always better to have drawn out honeycomb that you can start a new hive in. Sometimes they have to go and get water and bring water back to the hive to help cool the hive and for other reasons, as depending on the water content of the nectar. Water at times, sometimes if you have a very wet spring, the bees will actually have to spread that nectar out throughout the hive, and you can get situations where the queen no longer has enough space to actually lay eggs, and it can cause premature swarming. Guard bees, they're always our friends, except for when they're going after us. And foragers, and foraging is the deadliest duty. You've got other predators out there that may eat them. Swallows love bees. Cars, rainstorms, who knows what. And also certain pesticides can actually affect the ability of bees to find their way home and navigate. And so they may leave the hive and they just don't know how to get home. And I should be using all these. This is a really nice presentation, whoever built it. Worker bees has a stinger. Obviously, she's the one that's going to protect the hive. They'll generally go towards the face. different theories are out there, if it's because of carbon dioxide or if they've actually recognized that going towards the eyes of a attacker is more effective. Like I said earlier, when you actually get stung, the stinger has barbs on it. It is embedded in your skin. And it doesn't always get embedded though. There are times you may get stung and it just pokes you a little bit, and the bee would not die from that. But generally speaking, majority of times when you get stung by a honeybee, they're going to die after that. And there's an excellent picture of a stinger. So kind of the life cycle of summer bees. So you see there's different portions of this, and the 21 days on the left-hand side shows you the different stages after a queen lays an egg. When the queen first lays an egg, it's standing upright in the bottom of the cell. Queens should always be laying their eggs in the bottom of the cell. If a queen can't, she may have some issues and they may replace her. If you see eggs on the sides of the cell, it may mean that you have a laying worker, because a laying worker doesn't have a large enough abdomen to get to the bottom of the cell. Towards day 3, when the egg turns into a larvae, the egg will start to fall over, and you can help recognize if you have a frame of brood and trying to determine when the last time you may have seen the queen. Say you can't find your queen and you look through and you see that there's eggs standing straight up, well then she's been around recently, so she's probably just hiding. Queens get a little squirrely when you start taking their hives apart. So usually around 6 days later, after it turns into a larvae, that larvae is capped, and then they pupate at day 21 and emerge as an adult. And you can always recognize a very young bee. They're really kind of fuzzy. They look a little bit smaller. And once they start eating and whatnot, they grow out a little bit. So here's another just image of the different duties that they follow. And let's see. So, and also they do have something in here like Italian bees. So as I was talking earlier, there's European, Asian, and African bees. There are also varieties within Europe that you will see different types of bees, and they have different characteristics. Why am I not seeing the life of a honeybee? Oh, so this is kind of a special thing that I've been trying to research for the last couple of years. I've asked Megan Milbrath and different experts on what is the cause of bees to start being winter bees, because there is a physiological difference between summer bees and winter bees. Winter bees have larger fat glands and a larger, I'm going to mess up this word, hypopharyngeal gland, which is the gland that they use to produce royal jelly. It's in their head. In this image here, they're going to show that, well, you have a winter bee and then it's a meal of honey. This slide is lacking a little bit. After eating a bunch of honey, where they fast for 3 to 4 days. And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but there's a lot more to it than just what they're showing here. So they have these fat bodies, which they can actually use. They're fat bodies which contain vitogelin, and they actually use that to produce royal jelly, because in the spring, if they don't have any protein, then they can't raise brood. And they can't raise brood because they can't produce royal jelly without protein or pollen. So they can actually use this gland to produce royal jelly without the presence of any pollen. Now, a lot of people do put pollen patties out there either in the fall or early in the spring to help them out with that. When the colony is in the hive and it starts getting colder, usually once it's below 50 degrees, they'll form a cluster within the hive. The colder it gets, the tighter they will make that cluster. And the bees actually rotate through that cluster as time goes on. If the bees get tired, they'll rotate in and out. And they're constantly, obviously, eating honey out of the cells. And they generally, you're hoping that they will start near the bottom and they work their way up to the top. Bees generally in the winter will not move left or right across frames unless there is a warm spell where they can actually break cluster. I have had hives die where I had 2 deeps and it was too cold for them to move from the bottom deep up like, an inch to get up to the upper chamber. Here's one of the pictures of that Keith mentioned with a infrared camera attachment. I have one of these. They're very helpful. Usually sometime around the middle of February, if you check your hive, if it's a nice day out, you possibly could see some new larvae being produced. And so now you want to be a beekeeper. Well, if you're going to be a beekeeper, you need equipment and you need bees. So most people in the United States use Langstroth hives. Different places in the world use different designs, but they generally are similar in construction to this. There are top bar hives. There's different methods out there, but generally most people use Langstroth. I'm not going to get into too much detail in this, but generally speaking, depending on the way that you decide to have a hive, you can either use deeps, you can use mediums, you can use a medium for the brood chamber. If you are limited on the weight of the hive and being able to lift things, mediums are easier to use. And you can even go, instead of a 10 frame hive, you can go down to an 8 frame hive. The bees don't care. The bees just need a place to build comb and to store nectar and pollen and, basically raise larvae and store honey. There's different parts of a Langstroth hive. Generally speaking, you can have a telescoping cover. There's an inner cover that helps kind of insulating, and also it helps the bees control access into the hive. You have frames, obviously, like Keith talked about earlier. There's lots of different types, and foundation and different things like that. And basically, you've got either a brood chamber or you have space where the bees are either trying to bring the water content of nectar down to 18%, where it then can be brought into an area where the bees, the workers will actually transfer it to an area where then it can be put into a cell and it can be capped. There is a lot of transportation of resources within a hive. So here's an example of a telescoping cover. Below is called a migratory cover. And the benefit of a migratory cover is the fact that you can stack hives right next to each other for transportation purposes. Because the fact that this migratory cover is the same width as the actual hive. But they don't give as much protection as what a telescoping cover. Plastic ventilated hive, people tend to use obviously for winter purposes. And then there's there's different, I'd say this is more of a cutesy kind of cover. It's not very effective and efficient because unless you have the top of it sectioned off from the bees, they'll just fill it full of burr comb. And like I said, the bees don't care. So inner covers. So here's just a regular inner cover so that you have a hole in the center for ventilation that can go out through your upper cover. A notched one is so that the bees have an upper entrance and a lower entrance. An upper entrance is very important. Some people will actually drill holes as in their hive bodies, especially their honey supers, to allow the bees a more direct route to the areas where the honey is going to be stored. Bottom boards, well, you've got, I guess we're talking like a winter insert. This slot here is to allow the bees to escape out through the notched inner cover. This is to the right is kind of like a quilt box that is something that can help absorb moisture. And I'm not sure what a screened board would be for winter, unless they're just talking, it's a screened board, which is usually used on the
Oh
bottom.
yeah, that's just to show all the different types of inner covers, insulation, just different options out there.
Gotcha.
Or sugar board.
Here's your typical high bodies. You've got deeps, you have mediums, and you have shallows. Why do we have different sizes? Why not make them all the same size? Well, mainly because of weight, and also depending on what you want to do with your honeycomb. A lot of people will use shallows to do cut comb or mediums. Bees can fill up a medium or a shallow a lot quicker during a nectar flow going on than they could ever do a deep. And I tell you what, a deep full of honey is like 90 pounds, I think. They're heavy, and if they're up high, whew. So
The mediums are better for extracting too.
yes, mediums are a lot easier to extract, as Tammy mentioned. You have different types of frames. Mainly either wood or plastic. The plastic have to have, they need to be coated in wax or the bees generally won't use them. And some of them you'll see they're triple coated or whatnot. And that's kind of a marketing thing. Different colors. What's the difference between wired beeswax and just straight beeswax sheet? Wired beeswax has more support for extraction. If you're looking to do cut comb, you don't want wires in it. It's just not going to work really well. Drone, why do you need, well, drone cells are larger. And so the pattern on these is larger. If you're a queen producer that needs a lot of drones in the area for mating and things like that, you might want to have additional drones. There's also ways that you can control varroa by actually having the drone cells be capped. The varroa prefer drone cells because drones take 24 days to emerge versus 21, and it gives the possibility of 2 to 3 additional varroa mites that can emerge from that cell. The purpose would be to, once that drone cells are capped, you would take it out, put it in the freezer, take it back outside, the bees will clean it out for you. Or some people just scrape them out. But if you scrape them up, they still have to rebuild all that comb. So that's not always. Different colors. A lot of times that's more on what is easier for you to see eggs. And there's, you know, I'd say it's a personal preference. Bottom boards. So I think prior to varroa arriving, screen board bottom boards didn't exist. Maybe in hotter climates possible, but the purpose of screen bottom boards was hopefully that any of the dislodged varroa mites would fall through the screen down to the ground and hopefully be eaten by other predators like ants and stuff like that, and they couldn't get back onto the bees. Some people don't believe it really is very effective, and some people do. Solid bottom boards. In between the black lines there, they're showing you an entrance reducer. Purpose of an entrance reducer is if your entire entrance is open, you have the possibility of robbing from other hives. You don't have enough guard bees to actually protect the hive, so you have a smaller entrance. And it also can help eliminate other rodents and things like that entering your hive. Hive stands, there's all kinds. I like cinder blocks and 4x4s. There are reasons to have individual hive stands versus hive stands. So I've got like 8x8 or 8 foot long 4x4s on cinder blocks. I can have easily 4 hives on top of that. Problem is, once you go into that first hive, you're creating vibrations that the bees are feeling in those other hives, and it's alerting them that something's going on. And so they may be a little bit more apt to be having aggressive behavior. And the queen may be alerted, and she may go and hide somewhere, and it's harder to find things. So there's benefits, drawbacks to everything. Entrance reducers. So there's different types. My favorite right now is the one with the holes here. I use that in the summer and in the winter. I don't even change them out anymore. The wooden one is very common, obviously. This one here with this slide piece on here allows you to expand it or contract it for different sizes of hives. And you can also, if you think that you even need more of an entrance during peak honey flow times, I'll actually slide that over and create like a larger gap for the bees to get in and out of. One of the only things that I don't like about this is the edges are kind of sharp and it may do some damage to the bees as they enter and exit that. So they're, like I said, always drawbacks, but they're all different types. Queen excluders. What's a queen excluder? Don't you want to have a queen? Well, yeah, you want to have a queen, but you might want only have her in certain areas of the hive. The purpose would be to keep her in the brood chamber so that she doesn't move up to the top when you put honey supers up above with already drawn out comb and all this space to lay as many eggs as she possibly can. Well, brood in honey supers is not a good thing. There's a couple drawbacks. Number one, you either have to wait until those bees actually emerge and hopefully that they'll fill those back in. Generally speaking, once a bee has emerged from a cell, they don't like putting honey into those cells anymore. And so if they don't have anywhere else to put it, they may use it. Generally speaking, they won't. Also, another problem is every time a bee emerges or is in a cell as a larvae, they spin a cocoon within the cell. And as time goes on, that cell can get smaller and smaller. But the problem is when you go to extract the honey and you go to cut the caps off, they get cut, they get caught in your capping or decapping tool. Some of these other devices, so there's plastic queen excluders, there's metal ones. I prefer the metal ones. The plastic ones are great, they're cheaper, but they get brittle after a while and they crack. Some of them have a wooden frame on them. There's different purposes for some of these. These are more shim type things where you can control entrances for lots of different purposes. I think a little bit beyond a beginner presentation at this time. Sting prevention. I get stung all the time. I don't generally have a problem with it. Don't go out there trying to get stung, but if I do, and it's usually my own fault. So there's different types of jackets and suits. We generally use a full suit. And if I don't use a full suit, I'll just go out in whatever I'm wearing with just a veil because I just don't want to get stung in the face. And so a lot of times I may stop by Mike Sauter's bee yard and I didn't bring a suit with me and I might be picking something up from him and he's producing queens and everything like that. And I might be picking up a couple queens and he's got really, really nice bees. They're really nice. I love his bees because I can work his hives basically in shorts and a t-shirt and I don't get stung. He usually gets stung more than I do. I don't know. Maybe they just like me better. Different types of pants. Depending on how aggressive your bees are, you know, some outfits have a kind of a thin layer of cotton that they can actually sting through pretty easily, especially if that is pulled tight against your skin. A lot of the newer suits or maybe some of the more expensive ones have a breathable weave that lets air pass through and they're very comfortable.
Can I just make a comment about bee suits?
Yeah.
So one of the things with bee suits, and I know that people will, the old timers and stuff, they'll have T-shirts that say "This is my bee suit" and stuff like that. And people might kind of think that we go a little bit overboard, but for me, the being able to work the bees and not have the least bit concern about being stung is what really makes me calm and able to work the bees very confidently. So I think one of the things when you're considering your bee suit or your bee protection is to, you know, make sure that you use something that makes you comfortable to be with the bees. So for some people that's just a jacket, for some people that's just a veil, for some people that's you know, the full suit.
Thank you. So different veils, lots of different styles. The one on the right, the cricket or round veil, I started out with one of these and it was just like cotton on the top head part and it would press against my forehead and I get stung on my forehead all the time. The fencing veils I like a lot. That's what we've been using lately. It's a personal preference. Gloves. There's, you know, tons of different things that you can use out there. When we first got started, we didn't know what we were doing. I was using all kinds of stuff, you know. I found a putty tool scraper thing to use as a hive tool for a while. You know, it's like,
One thing you don't want to do. So one thing that you don't want to do is, so some people like the nitrile gloves. And again, some of it is what makes you feel more comfortable. Some people are super comfortable barehanded. But remember when you're doing like your bee suit and your gloves and stuff like that, go with white or light. There are black nitrile gloves. Or even, you know, some people just like to wear like a black work glove. Go with a light color. There is a purpose to that. The bees do not like the black and darker colors. So if you're going to go with the latex or the nitrile gloves, do get a light color when you're doing that.
yeah. I used black ones one time. It was kind of interesting to see the bees just going after my hands. Like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. No. Protection. It does get sweaty in a suit. You know, they've got like those kind of bandana things that you can wet and put around your neck if you're out there in the hot sun. Pretty tough at times. Duct tape, leg bands, they will climb up your legs. If there's a spot that they can get through, they will find it. Tools and bees. I've seen a picture of bees like this quite often. So what kind of tools do you need? Well, if you use a smoker, smokers are used to basically break up the ability for bees to communicate with their pheromones. And it basically kind of makes them kind of like hide out and they're not going to be out and as aggressive. These are markers on the right, paint pens to actually mark your queen. Like I said, you can practice on drones. And it's kind of interesting when you do enough drones and all of a sudden you come back and you see like drones painted in your hive and you're like, is that queen? No, it's not queen. This is a tool to check for varroa. This is where you would actually put the bees, a half cup of bees in here and either use alcohol or powdered sugar to dislodge the varroa mites and then count them. This little plunger thing here is something to catch your queen with, and then you can mark her. Brushes to brush the bees off of, maybe honey, honey supers and the frames and things like that. Hive tools, there's tons of hive tools out there. Everybody, I've got my personal preferences. This device over here is to pull frames out. This is a queen catcher. Actually, this little blue thing goes on the end of this plunger. This is a tool to embed the wire into foundation. This is a tool that you can use to break open cells for extracting honey. What do you use hive tools for? Well, bees have this thing called propolis. Propolis is, propolis is basically sap from trees that the bees use to create a kind of an immune system in their hive. Bees don't have an immune system like we do, and propolis is antifungal and antibacterial, and so they'll cover as much of their hive with propolis as they can. They will also try to seal off certain areas, openings and things like that with propolis if they can, and they can actually even chase like small hive beetles into an area and try to propolis them off so that they can't get back in. So a lot of it, hive tools are to split frames or remove frames from the hive bodies because they're stuck in there with propolis, or split the actual hive bodies from each other. Lots of uses for it. And I don't recommend the sword fights because they're just not long enough, but they are really fun for squishing yellow jackets. Smokers, they're pretty much all similar in their design and whatnot. The one on the right has an electric fan on it. The other ones use a baffle that you press that pushes air into the bottom of the smoker. There's an entrance down here where you have a little insert that keeps the fuel off of the bottom. And so the air goes through there, and then the smoke comes out through the spout. Beginners tend to overuse smoke. There are times that, lots of times, we don't even use the smoker anymore. It depends on the hive, if you've got kind of an aggressive hive, you may need to use it. Different fuel that you can use. Pine needles are great. They're free generally if you can find them. You can buy fuel, burlap, pine cones. We really like sumac plants. You can go and grab the red fruit blossoms. They make excellent fuel. Cedar chips. We generally use
Aspen chips. Aspen.
Oh, aspen chips. So with my quilt boxes, for water absorption in the winter, I use aspen chips, and in the rest of the year, we use those chips. We use aspen because it doesn't have as much of a fragrance and oil that the cedar actually has. Brushes, turkey feathers, all used to remove bees from frames for various purposes. Feeders. Feeding is very important if you want to have a real successful hive. The faster a hive can start off in the spring, the more honey it's going to be able to produce, or the more splits that you may be able to produce. Lots of times in the spring, if the weather isn't right and the bees can't forage, and they can't bring in resources, the queen isn't going to be able to produce as many workers. And lots of different types of feeders, mason jars with holes. This is one here is goes into the hive entrance. It's on the outside. Lots of ways to do it. We've been using the plastic ones in the bottom left corner lately. They work
for cost effective mason.
Grips, spacers. What do you need spacers for? For the longest time, I'm like, what are these spacer things for? Why are they different colors and they like different notches? And well, this is getting a little advanced, but not really. The first time that you put a frame in a honey super, the bees have to draw out the comb. And there's a thing called bee space, and they'll only draw that comb out to a certain depth. Then you go and you decap it, extract the honey, put it out so that the bees can rob it out and clean it, basically the excess honey that was left over in there, and then you put it away for storage for the winter. The next year, so that's a 10 frame system. The next year, when you go to put those frames out, you can put only 9 in there, and they will actually draw that honeycomb out even deeper. And so now you have only 9 frames to extract versus 10, and it's actually more an efficient use of storing the honey. And you can even go like down to 8 frames. And I don't know what the most anyone has ever done, but I can't imagine anything less than 7. Mite checks and pesticides. I'm not going to go real deep into this, but basically you need to check for mites. All hives have mites. I need to repeat that. All hives have mites. All hives have mites. It's if you don't think you have mites, you do. What you have to do is find out how many mites you actually have. At this time, 2 mites per 100 is the breaking point. If you're below that, you're fine. If you're above it, you need to be concerned and need to take some type of action. There's lots of different ways to battle varroa mites. And pesticides is not the only way that you can do it. But here we're talking pesticides. And so there's either organic pesticides or there are synthetic pesticides. Majority of people are using more organic pesticides these days. When varroa first came over, a lot of synthetic pesticides were used, and the bees became, well, not the bees, the varroa became resistant to it. And then it was no longer effective. So 2 of the more popular ones these days is oxalic acid and formic acid. So Mite Away quick strips use formic acid. Formic acid can penetrate the capping of a cell with the larvae underneath of it, where most of your mites are forming. Oxalic cannot. So generally speaking, you will only use oxalic when you don't have a lot of brood. I would say, maybe very early in the spring, and we're talking like March, or later in the year, or times when there is no actual brood out there. So you need bees, right? You're a new beekeeper. Where do you get bees from? Well, nowadays there's rarely any pharaoh bees out there, and trying to get a swarm as a new beekeeper is not a good idea. So you can buy packages. There's different types of packages. They come from different states. They come from different areas. There are benefits and drawbacks to them. Price can be a benefit. A nuke is more expensive than a package. Package comes from bees that are generally from the South. They're not Michigan bees. And the biggest difference is the queen is not a Michigan queen. And so a lot of people, if they have to buy packages, may requeen with a established breeder of queens in your local area.
Can you talk about what a package is and what a nuke is? A
Yeah.
package is 3 pounds of just shaken.
So what's the difference between a nuke and a package? So a package is literally this box here. It's wooden with screening on 2 sides. There's a can of sugar syrup inside of it. The queen may be in there with them. The queen may be not shipped with them. Some people ship them separately. The bees are just bees. There's no comb, there's no foundation, there's no place for them to actually build a hive. They shake bees into these packages with the big funnel and seal them up and put them in, I mean, there'll be, I don't know how many, thousands of packages that are shipped every year. If you notice in the middle, there's a queen cage. The queen is towards the bottom. You can see the mark on her a little bit, and there's some attendants in there also. A nuke is actually a nucleus hive or nuclear hive, meaning it's a smaller hive. It's only 5 frames, generally speaking. It can be deep or medium frames, but it has generally when you get a nuke, it should have 2 to 3 frames of eggs or brood, a frame of honey, and a frame of pollen. This is an operating hive that is ready to go. When you pull, they already have drawn out comb. When you put this into your hive, you actually transfer the frames, the bees, into your hive with 5 additional frames, or if it's an 8, 3 additional frames. This is a much faster way to get a hive up and running versus a package. A package, you dump it in. If you don't have drawn out comb, you have to feed the heck out of it because they need to draw out comb before the queen can even start laying, producing bees. The one on the right, the nucleus, you already have eggs, you have larvae, you have cap larvae, you've got bees that are ready to go. And they're more expensive, obviously. It takes more resources for a nuke versus a package. And one thing that Keith mentioned about a Michigan nuke is you need to be wary because you're not going to be able to have queens produced in Michigan. The only exception would be is if someone overwintered a nuke in Michigan, and then it obviously was from established stock out of Michigan, and it just made it through the winter, and they're just selling it in the spring. I have some of those myself. And the list goes on. If you want to spend money, you can spend money. Beekeepers are usually very frugal. Win Harless, oh my Lord, he could make bee equipment out of toothpicks and popsicle sticks. It's all your personal preference. kind of as a new beekeeper, talk to people, what's their preference, where are you going to start, what type of hive, what's your equipment, when you get a hive and then you have honey, how are you going to extract it? Do you know someone you can borrow an extractor from? Do you have someone that you can get a heated knife or different tools to actually decap the honey? There's lots of different things. Most of the stuff down here on the right-hand side is about queen rearing and production. There's just, you can always use food grade buckets with spigots on it to hold large amounts of honey. Klein and Son is a great local resource for all types of containers. And go to your local
Bee store?
No, your local bee stores, they're around, and also your local events. There's always vendors at all these events. It's a great place to visit and, see things, you can actually hold it and whatnot. Hopefully that will start back up soon as we get past our lockdown and different things going on. I wanted to say Varroa, but we don't have Varroa.
We have COVID.
Yeah, we have COVID, not Varroa. Essential equipment list. It's pretty much everything that we already talked about. Shoes. I have done beekeeping in flip-flops.
But it's not recommended.
It's not recommended, but it's not essential. I mean, books, information, be wary of YouTube. There's lots of great information out there, but don't take it for gospel. Everybody has, like Keith said, you ask 10 beekeepers, you'll get 11 answers, and then they'll start discussing more. And yeah, it just keeps going. Basically, kind of your general costs, depending on, what you need, how you want to do things. I would say for most of the equipment vendors, and this is for their benefit, you need to think ahead, because when you think you need more equipment and you call them up on Friday and you want equipment on Saturday or Sunday, you've got probably 100 other people out there asking the same questions. So think ahead. You should always have extra frames, some extra high bodies available, because when you need them now.
Wait, is that from working out?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, this is.
Somebody.
I have not seen that before.
That was my little touch to the end.
Yeah, I like it. A nice picture of a swarm. Swarms, there's some ideas out there that swarms are generally docile. Maybe, kind of, yeah. They're looking for a new home, but if you mess with them, you can get stung. There's actually some very humorous videos out on YouTube about people catching swarms and
Not being prepared.
yeah, not being prepared. I had a swarm look very similar to this one a couple of years ago. And swarms are beekeepers' gold because they're free bees, and you can actually have multiple queens in a swarm. So that's something that you should always check on. Like last year with Swarm.
Palooza.
Yeah, it's just Swarm Palooza. It is crazy. talk to people as much as you can. An excellent point of talking about neighbors before you put bees in your yard. If you do have bees in a suburban area, make sure that they have water, because the bees will they will need water. And if somebody's got a pool nearby, they're going to go in their pool and they're going to die in the pool and stuff like that. And your neighbors are going to be like, where are all these bees coming from? Just, read and read more. And absolutely find a bee club to join. And you can join more than one if you want. And classes are great. And they fill up fast. The American Bee Journal is an excellent publication, and so is Bee Culture. We get both of those. Oh, good question. Why do you want to keep bees? There's lots of reasons. Our reasons is probably not in this list. But it's to help the environment. It makes great gifts, honey and things like that. It's an excellent hobby. Both Tammy and I love going out and working the bees together. And there's always, as much as you think that you know about bees, you're always going to be learning new things. Stinging insects, yes. You will get stung eventually. I don't react almost at all, so it doesn't bother me to get stung. Being allergic is an important thing. I should have an EpiPen. Just because I'm not allergic today does not mean that I will be, safe tomorrow. Your body is constantly changing, and there have been people that have died from anaphylactic shock, basically.
After 40 years of
Yeah,
beekeeping.
after like 40 years of beekeeping, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Yeah, the language of bees, and it's, you can talk to your bees, but you need to be able to listen to them. There is a lot of time commitment, not a ton, but you need to be consistent with it. You should be, 1 to 2 hours per hive every 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah, you could. Maybe sometimes a year it takes twice as much as that. We try to check our hives every 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's 1 to 2 hours per hive. So yeah, it could take
Right.
6 hives, could take a little time.
Yeah. And depending on, like, when we first started beekeeping, we spent a lot of time, way more time than we needed to, going through the hive. We've changed our structure of how we have our hives now, and the structure meaning that we only have a single deep for the brood chamber. It makes it a lot easier to find the queen, check for, if she's laying, if there's disease and different things like that, how much brood, and if they need, different resources and things like that. Don't recommend starting out that way. You have to be really committed to it, because if your hive can overflow quite quickly with only a single deep as for brood, and then your hive is going to swarm. Yes, you will be an ambassador for beekeeping once people find out that you are a beekeeper. They will ask you all kinds of questions, and they'll be like, wow, you must be a real expert, and you've only done it for a year, because you know so much more than the average person does. Generally speaking, it's a great idea to start with 2 hives. Why? The biggest reason, if your queen dies, and you don't recognize that soon enough, and you no longer have eggs or very, very young brood, you can't produce a new queen. And so if you have a second hive, you can either take the queen and let them produce a new queen. You can shift resources back and forth. There's a lot of good reasons for having two hives to start out with. May not be able to afford two hives, depending on your resources and different things like that. But make friends with other people if you need some help, if you only have a single hive. Just kind of make plans on worst case scenarios, and then if bad things happen, it's not that big of a deal if you're prepared. So I guess from a local, and as a new beekeeper, is this even possible to have bees all over someone? Is that photoshopped? Is that real? It's real. Generally, they will have a queen, maybe in a cage, usually like around the top of their shirt, and the bees will congregate where the queen is. And they'll cover his face too. So he's obviously brushing away from his face. In the center, taking bees out of a package. There's just tons of information out there. Oh. And I think that was the end.